Totally Nonsense on Nonsense News Nation. Totally.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kids and cadets, to another riveting edition of Totally Nonsense on Nonsense News Nation. I'm your host / boy, Brandon Skydellis, Hebrew name Shmuel Melech.
Hello, and I'm Justin, returning for another epic episode.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I hope it's a Happy New Year. I have no idea. It just started.
Well, it's better than 2020.
Well, yeah, in terms of Marvel television especially, because that's our topic today. So, last year in the MCU, people said there was nothing. There was no Disney Plus show, no movie. But they forget about the last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is amazing, and Helstrom, which came out. So it counted as something. So we're actually, this year is going to be a little bit different, and definitely more of an upgrade. We're actually going to get some movies out and some Disney Plus shows, starting with WandaVision, January 15th. So before then, I wanted to take and pay tribute to the MCU television before there was Disney Plus.
And there was a quite extensive library of television shows that Marvel developed all the way back, almost from the inception of the Marvel Universe, going all the way back to like 2012.
2013.
Yeah.
With Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then the last thing was on technicality, in 2020 with Helstrom.
Yeah, so they had a pretty big run, and I think as a Marvel fan, one should appreciate these, and they're kind of hidden gems.
Right, so some of them.
And some of them
some of them. So, just a little background. So, Marvel Television was a different, I think, branch off from the Marvel Studios, but it still was technically part of the MCU. There were some loose connections, there was bigger connections, but they had no bearings on the movies, whereas movies would sometimes have bearings on the shows. And recently, they fired Jeff Loeb or whatever, who was the leader of Marvel Television, who hated Kevin Feige with Marvel Studios.
Yeah, so they've been trying to basically reorganize, and there's this kind of new approach led by Kevin Feige to really integrate the new television shows with the movies. So you have to get Disney Plus if you want to follow the MCU, whereas before you could be watching an ABC show or a Netflix show and just immerse yourself in that world and not really have to know too much about the movies.
Yeah, so this is kind of it. So it's good that we have these connections now to the movies that you know and love. I think we always wanted this actual connections of the shows mattering, and a lot of characters that may not get as much love in the movies are going to have their own shows, which is awesome, and I'm all for it. But at the same time, you could really do your own thing and maybe make a darker show or a show with a very different tone, whereas now everything's homogenized with MCU, whether it be the movies or the shows, even though most of them are quality.
Yeah, so even though the stories will be quality and it'll be interesting and they'll be getting that Disney money, I feel like we've just kind of left the time where we may get a 20 episode season or 15 episode season where we have different directors with different creative visions and different stories that we might not necessarily see. Not every story needs to be a cinematic masterpiece. We could see a smaller story. And I think that's something that we're going to be missing and we might not get again.
Right, so let's pay tribute to this phase of the MCU that will never be again. It's kind of like how X-Men, we had the X-Men franchise and now they'll eventually be MCU. So it's kind of like in that sense. So we're paying tribute right now. We have 12 different shows. Justin and I just made a list. And we're going to check it twice and find out which show was naughty or nice. So let's start off with the worst, and then we're going to work our way to the best. So Justin, I know there was some deliberation throughout the list, but the worst one was very obvious.
Yeah, we both instantly agreed, and if you know anything about Marvel Television, you would automatically say this was the worst. It is actually one of Marvel's worst failures that they tried to hide from every platform.
It was one of the worst failures in television in general, and that is none other than Inhuman. Do you know with a name called Inhuman, it's going to be inhumane to the eyes?
It was really hard to watch, and right. I think I watched a few episodes of it.
There's like 6 or 7, maybe 8 episodes.
Yeah, I
I
think
watched
there were
all of it.
8, and Brandon watched all of it. I
terrible.
watched the first maybe 2 or 3. It was really hard to watch. The writing was atrocious. The effects were even worse than the writing. It was honestly just sad to watch. And the fact is, they got some really good actors.
Can I tell you the funny thing here? So originally, early on, I think phase 2 maybe, or something, they were planning on making it a film.
Mm-hmm.
Then it got off that list. We didn't know why, per se, originally. And then it was made into a show, and the first 2 episodes were put in IMAX theaters.
Yeah, they were actually shown in theaters.
You have groundbreaking works like Daredevil that could be very cinematic, that will never see the light of day in a theater. But then you have Inhumans, literally the worst thing Marvel in general has ever put out. And it got the theater treatment, and it bombed.
And it was critically,
terrible.
it was bombed. Everybody hated it. I don't think there was a single fan out there.
Kind of like
it was just kind of the butt of all jokes.
Well, Inhumans were introduced in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe in season 2 of the show, which is interesting. But these Inhumans were not the ones that came about from S.H.I.E.L.D. It was more so them living on the moon, and then they went off the moon because, was it Michael Bolton, whatever his name from Game of Thrones, decided to take over the moon.
It was a very, like, they were trying to make it a very, like, political kind of show. And
They didn't have the brains for that.
we didn't need that in the Marvel universe. Frankly, it came off very stupid sometimes, really.
All the time. The dialogue is one of the worst I've ever heard. The characters are not appealing, but there's redeemable things. It's so bad, it's good. It's hysterical. First of all, the effects are awful.
No, it was some of the worst to ever see on
The
on
giant
TV.
dog lockjaw is hilarious.
The fact that it was even on IMAX, I can't believe
Listen,
that.
one of
It
the
looked
main
like a PS2.
One of the main like family members in the show, Medusa, has like magic hair or whatever. And because they didn't have a budget, they decided to shave it off for most of the show. So they couldn't even like showcase the powers well.
Yeah.
And it was just cringy. The dialogue was terrible. What more can I say besides this is a steaming pile of you-know-what?
And again, this is nothing on the actors. It's all for the writing and the effects. That was just the dumpster fire waiting to happen.
Now, a lot of people, Justin, they didn't really see Inhumans too much. But the next thing on the list they did see and people would say is the worst thing in the MCU, which I personally don't think because Inhumans totally is. And also starts with the letter I. Iron, not Iron Man, not Iron Man 2, not Iron Man 3, Iron Fist.
What is Iron
What
Fist?
happens when you take away all of Iron Man's armor but leave a fist? Well, you get a very lackluster show. So Iron Fist was the 4th Netflix show that came out right before Defenders. They're setting up this Avengers-styled street-level team-up crossover, which is going to be epic. You had Daredevil, which everyone loved. Jessica Jones, which everyone loved. Luke Cage, which literally broke Netflix, everyone loved. And then this guy totally fell short.
Iron Fist.
And then people realized that maybe the Netflix shows aren't as great as people said.
I remember a big controversy when the show came out was this idea of whitewashing. I mean, the character is white in the comics. But just the acting, everything, like, frankly, the whole thing was that he was in Kunlun and fought a dragon. We saw more of the dragon in a Lego game than in the Netflix show. A Lego game.
He talked about his magical place where he trained, and like we're just kind of in the city where he's homeless, and then he's with Ward Meacham with the business side of things, which is boring. I want to see Kunlun. He talked about a dragon. And you're right, Justin. We actually, in Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, I think, in one of those games, you fight the dragon that he talked about. So I got more fulfillment from that, even Thor Ragnarok with the dragon, than in Iron Fist.
And from what I remember when it came out, people were trying to compare it to Arrow, because it was kind of similar, where this rich dude comes back from living in isolation and trying to adjust. Yeah.
Right.
And this was like a poor man's really bad version of Arrow.
And that's funny.
Arrow is a CW show with no budget.
It's a CW show that was written for 12-year-olds. Listen, I watch Arrow. I watch all those shows, so I'm no better than anyone else, any one of you watching it. But Iron Fist was definitely a huge departure from the Netflix shows. It wasn't the worst thing ever. I was still like entertained,
was
and
some
season 2
enjoyment. And season
definitely
2
was a
did
big
get
step
better.
up.
Yeah.
But that doesn't excuse things. While I actually did kind of enjoy Iron Fist, compared to everything else on this list, besides Inhumans, it could have been so much better.
And let's just put it this way. I wasn't upset when they canceled it. I believe this was one of the first shows that they announced that they were canceling. And that made sense because, frankly, it really wasn't bringing in the viewers. There wasn't much excitement. And a lot of people were just upset by it.
Now, Iron Fist was key. It kind of failed, but it was key in finally setting up this awesome Avengers level, street level crossover that's like the Avengers for Netflix.
And remember, this is what they've been building up to for years across multiple seasons of shows.
You got Daredevil, seasons 1 and 2, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and of course, my boy Iron Fist. And then you finally get Defenders, where they're all together, and the trailer looked awesome. They played a Nirvana song. It was sick. I was pumped. We were all pumped. And then it just wasn't... It was okay. It wasn't really good.
It was honestly one of the most flawed of the Netflix shows. I felt that it was rushed, and they didn't really have enough story to make it cohesive. And all the action scenes were filmed like in the freaking dark. You could barely see it.
Right. Yeah, I think they could have done... I mean, the character interactions were very good, because we know and love all these characters, aside from Iron Fist.
They actually improved, from my memory, Iron Fist, through his interaction with Luke Cage. And I remember for a time, there was a rumor that they were going to bring, bring Luke Cage and Iron Fist together in their own spin-off, because, of course, in the comics, they're...
Heroes for hire.
Yeah, heroes for hire.
Which is a very cool dynamic in the comics, but... And it was very teased upon for that, and then I think maybe Luke Cage season 2 and things like that. But it could have been better. The threat was very weak. The hand was built up. You had some very hilarious moments with this old tiny lady Madame Gao.
Madame Gao.
Like her henchmen, her stupid henchmen were trying to get a door open, and they couldn't budge. So she's like, I got this, and she like uses the force to move this giant metal door. It was hilarious.
I remember the main villain was just some woman that we really didn't even know about.
I remember
for the other shows. Like, it just kind of showed up, and you're like, okay.
The only thing I remember from the villain is that she was a middle-aged woman that looked like someone's mom in the from the crew. That's like, you know what? I've been busting my butt making these Netflix shows. Can you get my mom to be the villain? It's the least you could do.
She was really not charismatic in any way. It was very forgettable.
I think Elektra maybe have ended her life or something. And Elektra was just kind of a brainwashed version of herself, and she was the weak part of season 2 of Daredevil. So it wasn't that great. But yeah, it still had some good moments, but all in all, very disappointing. But still a good time at the same time. It's nice schlock.
If you like the Netflix shows and you want something quick to watch that you don't have to think, watch Defenders.
And the next show, Justin, you don't have much experience with this. You saw maybe, I think, the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, like first 2 or 3 episodes. And it wasn't because I didn't like it. I just didn't really have time, frankly. I was watching too many shows.
I don't have a life. I'm such a... I love Marvel too much. I couldn't say no to anything. Even Inhumans. I saw all of Inhumans, so you know I'm going to watch this show. That is Cloak and Dagger. It's the one MCU show that went its way to Freeform, which is a very much like the CW, Disney CW.
Yeah, Disney CW.
But you know what? I think it was more quality than like a typical CW superhero show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. From the 3 episodes that I saw, it definitely brought up some important points and tried to make it, bring up societal issues. And the acting was really good. Yeah. The effects were decent for being a freeform show. So I didn't really have an issue with it.
I'm not sure people liked it maybe as much as me. I don't think it was the greatest show at all, but I think like it definitely had some very compelling moments and some very, really good episodes. I mean, the first episode really grabs me, but then a lot of times the only reason why it's kind of low on the list is it didn't reach its full potential of what Cloak and Dagger are in the comics for the most part. And it was just kind of teasing what could come, but because they never went past season 2, we'd never fully know. They did They did appear in Marvel's Runaways, and that was a really cool crossover. But yeah, it was a very enjoyable show. Not one of Marvel's best, but not really terrible in any way. So pretty good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And then the next show was something I was really hyped about. We met the actor John Bernthal. He was in Daredevil Season 2, and he was the highlight, the standout. This is The Punisher.
Yeah, The Punisher is a character that both me and Brandon enjoy. We've read the comics. We think he's a really interesting character, and they could have went all out with this. And John Bernthal is a fantastic actor. I don't think there's any problem with him. Maybe besides the screaming, but
right.
That was
Speaking
fun.
of screaming, you could tell in the background a dog Baron is barking. That means he's definitely a big fan of Punisher. But unfortunately for you, Baron, it is not super high on the list because the Punisher reached his peak, honestly, in his first appearance in Daredevil. I don't think it could have been a lot more violent or a much more clever show than it was. But it had some really, really awesome moments in Season 1 that I will always remember. Sam Stein was a hilarious character.
I mean, we knew when he was introduced, he was going to die.
With a stick up his butt, and he was there to die, and it was hilarious, unintentionally, but we loved it. Season 2 had more violent, better moments for Punisher, but it was also a lot weaker.
The story was highly flawed. There was like
two subplots.
Two stories going
Pilgrim,
on.
The other with I don't know with Jigsaw, which was terrible.
Oh my God, the Jigsaw was
awful.
Laughable.
They set him up really well in Season 1, and they totally destroyed
his ugly thing is a small line.
Jigsaw in the comics is supposed to be like this horrific monster of a human with a messed up face, and he just had like maybe a few stars. He was still really hot.
And some of the scenes were just laughable when they had the whole gang of the ex-veterans robbing a bank.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we're gonna form together, like we're gonna unite, and you think it's like a positive thing where they're gonna save the day, maybe become the new Defenders. No, they're just gonna be villains and rob banks. As Double Toasted, one of our favorite podcasts, said, they're cartoon villains.
No, they were. So I feel like in Punisher Season 2, there was definitely a lot of wasted potential. And if they were more focused on a specific story, it could have been a lot better.
Right. So, but still, it ranks above Cloak and Dagger because I think it had much higher highs than Cloak and Dagger, but it had a lot lower lows than Cloak and Dagger, at least in my opinion. So that's why it's not too high. So next, we have a show, the latest show, Justin. You have no experience with it, so I'll just talk about it. Helstrom. Now, going into it, I didn't hear the best of things, or it wasn't like, it was very swept under the rug.
I read one review.
No one wanted to promote it. No one talks about it whatsoever. I'm not even sure it's technically part of the MCU anymore, but there is like a little Roxxon sign somewhere, so it counts, and it's part of the Wikipedia of the MCU, so I will count it. And that is Helstrom. So Helstrom, I was pleasantly surprised. Was it the best show? Not at all. But the thing I liked about it is it really did its own thing. It didn't feel like anything from the movies or the ABC shows or Netflix or anything. It was definitely the darkest of the shows, which I love. I'm a huge fan of like Ghost Rider and things like that from the comics, Morbius.
We're supposed to get a Ghost Rider show.
Yeah, so they're going to put in the MCU like a Ghost Rider cinematic universe. They're going to have Ghost Rider, the Robbie Reyes introduced in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., have his own show, and Helstrom, and they'd be side by side and cross over and hopefully make more shows. But because Marvel Television got debunked, Ghost Rider was killed, and the only reason why Helstrom had a Season 1 was because it was already in production. So Helstrom was enjoyable. It had some like very interesting characters, a good dynamic with the Helstrom siblings, the brother and sister, and it was about possessions and demons, and it wasn't the greatest show, but it definitely was very enjoyable. So I don't think it had a serious amount of lows. I can understand if you don't think it's that great or that interesting, but I personally did think it was interesting and something very different from anything we've seen.
So does it deserve all the hate that it got?
I don't think it got a lot of hate. It got a lot of indifference. I think it definitely deserved a Season 2. Definitely. I enjoyed it. Not the greatest thing ever, but sometimes you don't need the greatest thing ever. Sometimes you just need a nice show to watch that's kind of harmless, and that was Helstrom. So, Now we're going to go on to, I think, the shows that were definitely a lot better. And we're going to start with the show you also have no experience with.
No, I did
so I have
not
to speak
watch.
towards it. Marvel's Runaways. That was the first show on Hulu for the MCU, which kind of sucked because it was Netflix. It was like primetime television, then Netflix, and now I'm like, God damn it, Marvel. Now I have to get a Hulu subscription to watch your shows now. And Runaways, it's about kids that discover that their parents are villainous in some way. It's definitely explained better in the show. And then they get powers of their own or technology, and they have to work together and run away. I thought season 1 was okay. I didn't think it was that great, honestly. It was alright. But then season 2, you actually have the part where they're running away, which made for much better dynamics in the show. And then things got really serious, and they had different arcs. And then at season 3 was definitely a step up of that. And then at the very end, you had I think the last episode was similar to Endgame, where there was literal time travel, which was just awesome.
When was the crossover with
That was season 3 with Cloak and Dagger, and it was really good. At that point, it was really engaging. I still don't think it was the best show ever, but it really improved dramatically, in my opinion, from season 1. Not that season 1 was terrible. And it became a really enjoyable show, and you do really care about the characters. And I think it ended on a good note. Would I have liked to see more? Yeah, it was definitely really enjoyable. So it's on Disney Plus now, I believe. So if you want to check that out, please do. It's a pretty good show. It's pretty good. Okay. Now you know this show,
All right,
Justin.
now I can talk about this show. This show was really a gem that Marvel gave us due to fans' demand and love for this character. She started out in the movies, and then they gave her her own television show, which was really pure gold. It was a diamond in the rough, and unfortunately, it was canceled prematurely, and unfortunately, we didn't get to see the resolution until Endgame.
Yes, and this show is Agent Carter. Agent Carter was a character in Captain America, the First Avenger, and she was very good. She was a very good character.
Haley Atwell is a fantastic actress, and she really brought this character to life and made the fans demand to see more.
Well, there was I believe, a short film that they made.
Yeah, like a DVD
a bonus
extra.
DVD. But then after that, they're like, you know what, screw it. Let's give this lady her own show. And at first, I'm like, really? You have all these characters in Marvel, and you're just going to choose someone without superpowers that was a side character. But you know what? After watching season 1 and then season 2, it got really enjoyable. It was a lot of fun.
I love that it was like a period piece.
Oh, yeah.
You
That's
see,
what I was going to say.
Like S.H.I.E.L.D. in the 1940s. You see it
You have
develop.
Howard Stark,
Howard
Tony Stark's
Stark.
dad.
You see this great character, the love interest, almost Sousa, who we will see
Later on the list.
Later on the list.
It was... And then you have Jarvis, who was before Iron Man's Jarvis. So it was great for MCU fans. It was a very enjoyable piece. And it's a shame it got canceled prematurely. But at the very least, we got resolutions in the form of one movie and a last season of a television show. So we'll get to that a little later. So I will tell the resolution for the movies. So in Endgame... it's a time travel movie, a good portion of the film, and then they go to I think the 50s maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the 50s.
And then you see Jarvis, which is unbelievable because the movies never tied into the shows, but here it finally did. They had that same actor, so it counts, part of the MCU. And then at the very end, because of time travel, Captain America ends up with Peggy, and it's a shame in one sense because she seems so good with Sousa. But we'll get to that later. But as a fan of the movies, it's wonderful.
It was really a fulfilling moment. And that's really where I think the TV shows did best, where they made these light connections and we got a big payoff at the end.
Right. So now we're really getting on to the good stuff. Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
It was the second show on Netflix. So after Daredevil Season 1 and Jessica Jones Season 1, it seemed like Netflix was unstoppable. Season 1 was
one of the best things
brilliant.
I've seen on television. What's the main actress's?
I'm forgetting her name.
Yeah, the one who plays Jessica Jones. She does a fantastic job. She really embodies the character and brings her to life like no one else. And the thing that I really liked about the show was that it kind of had its own theme and style. And I really loved that private eye.
It was like a detective show.
And it was also a psychological show.
Right. Well, here's the thing. It was part of all these superhero shows, but it really didn't feel like a superhero show. Yeah, she had some like powers that were kind of vague, strength and jumping really high. But it was more so about the story. And in the first season, she has to deal with trauma of being controlled by David Tennant's Kilgrave, which is one of the best.
He's one of the best villains.
5, if not top 3 universe. Marvel villains to come out of the MCU. He was fantastic. So much so that they had to throw him into the next 2 seasons in some way. He was just that amazing. And for her to deal with this trauma, and there was really compelling characters, it was just such an interesting addition to the MCU. And it was
a really grounded approach to the quote-unquote superhero genre, which was really refreshing, and that's what I kind of like to see, because we've all seen the Marvel movies, the DC movies, the DC TV on the CW, so I really like to see someone with a vision and really bringing that to life.
Yeah, so it was definitely a fantastic, fantastic show, but definitely season 2... I still enjoyed it, but it was definitely a departure. It wasn't a masterpiece.
I think they didn't really know exactly where they were going with it, but it was interesting and compelling
nonetheless. Really good. And then season 3, I think, was an improvement, but still, it's not going to compare to season 1. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed everything. I thought at the very end, how they paid off some characters like Malcolm and Trisha was really interesting, and even Hogarth, who I hated in season 1, but ended up loving in season 2 and 3. So, yeah, they did a lot of interesting with the characters. So that's why Jessica Jones is so high up. And the next one, her love interest in season 1 and got his own show, main part of the Defenders, that's Luke Cage, which literally broke Netflix. It was so popular.
This show was not just an important part of the Netflix universe, but I think it was an important part of the Marvel universe, and it came out at the right time. It really spoke and represented black culture like we hadn't seen before in the Marvel universe. Now, this was obviously before Black Panther, but this was really a street-level view, New York view of an African-American and his experience, and it really spoke to that.
Right. I mean, they did so many cool things. Like, they had kind of jazzy music. They had, like, some hip-hop, too, but, like, you really got embraced. You felt like you were embracing this culture. And you saw Luke Cage go through it. It was a very personal show. And it was really highlighted that it's a beautiful thing that this black man is bulletproof when you have, in real life, people of
color, right?
Color who are getting shot up, who don't have that luxury. It's like an inspiring thing. Now, they set up a really great villain in season 1, and then they kind of killed him off for, at the end, a much weaker villain. But then you also had Mariah.
Yeah, Mariah was insane. She's one of the most evil people.
Bushmaster was awesome, and what they did with him in season 2 was great. And Luke Cage, he's just a very admirable, like, very nice character who wants to do good, and you feel that. He's a very inspiring hero, definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Michael Coulter does a fantastic job, and this show is it's not perfect, but it's really good.
Yeah, it is really quality good television with a voice and with a vision, and hopefully we could see it again.
Okay, now the final 2, this was hard, but we had to narrow it down to make things objective. So
and this show, because we met some of the actors.
We did meet. We met at least 2 of the actors in the show. So this show started off Marvel Television and practically ended it off with its last season last year. We have to give it the number 2 spot to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
This show has been one of the most surprising and long-lasting shows that I have ever seen. And its conclusion was probably the most fulfilling conclusion of a series I have ever seen.
Definitely. Better than Arrow, that's for sure. So anyway, it started off in 2013, and it stars Phil Coulson, who died in Avengers, who's a great character, who started back even in the first Iron Man. He started off with Iron Man and Samuel L. Jackson, so Coulson is a character to take seriously. He died, and he was brought back in the show, and he had his own team in S.H.I.E.L.D. We don't know why he came back or how, and it's eventually explained later on. But it was the first season was very shaky. It was very shaky. It was very like villain of the week.
They didn't really know what direction to take it in, and that was because they were trying to hide stuff, because at this time they were still trying to say that they were connected with the movies, and that really hampered their ability to do good storytelling.
I mean, they got some really cool cameos like Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury and Lady Sif from the Thor movies, so cool things. But the cool connection that made it a little bit better was when the Hydra twist for S.H.I.E.L.D. So S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of no more in the movies, so kind of keeping S.H.I.E.L.D. alive in the show was very interesting. And then after that, they're like, okay, we got to do our own thing. So they introduced Inhumans to season 2 and made one of the stars an Inhuman, which is a very interesting dynamic.
And the character Daisy, she is one of the most underrated heroes of the Marvel Universe.
Oh, she started out with the name Skye. She was just kind of cringy and awful. But then she grew to be such a compelling hero as the show went on.
Like, I would love to see her again in her own show or even as a cameo in a Marvel movie. She really deserves it. All the casts were standout, but she really made the show.
May, Fitz, and Simmons, who had the best romance in anything in the MCU. You can't change my mind. It's literally the best. Better than Cap and Steve. Not Cap and Steve. Maybe Cap and Steve. They love each other. Cap and Peggy.
Oh, definitely. I mean, these people were planets apart and still found a way
they would
to
always be together. And the show got crazy. Like, season 2 is definitely, I don't think it was the best still, but then season 3 got really good. Mm-hmm. Season 4, they had like 3 arcs, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. Ghost Rider, who was one of my favorite heroes, who they nailed. Then they had LMDs, where you couldn't tell which hero was a robot. Yeah. And there's only one that was left, which was insane. Then they had one where they're in the framework, which is pretty much a version of the Matrix. Mm-hmm. So it was insane. Season 5, they went to the space in the future, and they met Deke, who was a hilarious character.
Which you grow to love by the end.
Right. And then Phil, they didn't know that they were going to continue the show, so they kind of ended it, and they killed off Phil. But then season 6, they brought him back. It was an alien with his body called Sarge. Then season 7 was brilliant. It was a time travel thing. It was, I guess, the Endgame equivalent to S.H.I.E.L.D., to the television, where they had to go back in time and part of S.H.I.E.L.D. history. And they brought back Phil as an LMD Chromicon robot.
And by the way, they do an amazing job with these robots, androids, Chromicons. Some of the best that I've seen on television.
The character Enoch.
Enoch has my heart. It was so upsetting when he died. I really hope we can see him again.
Yeah, so all in all, S.H.I.E.L.D. It ended beautifully on that last episode. It's literally like, when I think of Marvel television, I think of it. And there's only one show that objectively tops it. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's Daredevil.
Yeah, Daredevil is a fantastic show. And this was really hard for us when we were kind of creating this list, because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. we might have had more enjoyment out of in the long term, but as Brandon said, it was highly flawed, especially at the beginning.
At the beginning, for sure.
Daredevil was a masterpiece from episode 1.
Yes, so Daredevil season 1 blew everyone's minds. It literally was so grounded in street level, and the choreography was amazing, and the cinematography. It was quality filmmaking, and the acting was superb. Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin is definitely one of the best MCU villains. I think maybe just under Thanos. But he was so good in those 3 seasons.
And he really brought that role to life.
Who is Daredevil? Matthew Cox?
Yeah, Matthew Cox.
Was born to play Daredevil.
I cannot see another person as Daredevil. I know Ben Affleck played him in the early 2000s. Well, he killed that movie. But Matthew Cox, just great. He really brought it to life.
And the side characters,
Foggy
Nelson and Karen Page,
Yeah.
and those other characters, they were very compelling, and you cared about their stories. But the thing, it was really like watching a movie sometimes. It was such quality television. And then season 2 introduced Punisher, which they nailed. Again, a little bit not as great with Elektra, but still very quality. And then season 3 was even better than season 1 with Bullseye. And at the end, that final fight was just incredible. And the payoff, and ended very well.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to see a street-level, grounded Marvel property, this is it. And unfortunately, with the Marvel shows going to Disney Plus, I just don't know if we'll ever see something like this again.
Maybe Moon Knight, but I'm not sure it'll be this level like Daredevil.
No.
It wasn't afraid to get bloody.
No, it got bloody.
Serious.
It got real. Those hallway scenes are just masterpieces of television.
Yeah, I always think about those. They filmed
It was like one shots.
They didn't. Well, the first 2 seasons they had it where it seemed like it was one shot, but it wasn't. The final season, when he's in the prison, was actually like one take, which was incredible.
That man can take a beating.
Right. So just props to
all the actors,
and the filmmakers,
the choreographers.
So it's objectively the best. If we were counting the X-Men shows, which is still part of Marvel Television, but it's on the MCU.
Yeah, some honorable mentions.
So Gifted would probably be in the middle. It was a very good show. And Legion was such a masterpiece, I'd actually probably rank it over Daredevil.
Yeah, Legion is great. I would highly recommend it.
It makes you think it's the trippiest show, and we love it. But anyway, for the MCU, Inhumans was the worst, and Daredevil was the best. So, Justin, this was a lot of fun going over. I had a great time with you.
Definitely a nice trip down memory lane.
Yeah. I hoped you liked that. I know I actually did. And if you want to hear more from us, I sure hope you do. We're on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, Anchor, and YouTube. We have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We post every now and then. We even have a website, nonsensenewsnation.com. And if you want to contact us personally and tell us why Inhumans isn't so bad, because I'd like to hear any argument defending that pile of dung, you can contact us at nonsensnewsradio@gmail.com. That is nonsensnewsradio@gmail.com. Once again, I've been Brad Nels.
And I've been Justin.
And we'll see you next time in the next podcast. Peace and love.